No one noticed when she stopped eating with the rest of the staff. No one noticed when her hands began to tremble while polishing the silver trays. In a house filled with cameras, security guards, and expensive silence, the only person who was truly invisible was the maid, and by the time they realized she was sick, it was already too late. Her name was Amina. She had worked in the mansion for 7 years. She woke up before sunrise, cleaned rooms that were bigger than her entire childhood home, and moved the halls so quietly that people forgot she was even there. To the family, she was just the maid. To the guests, she was a shadow in a gray uniform. But behind her soft smile was a woman hiding something serious, something painful. The house belonged to a wealthy businessman and his family. They were respected in the city, known for their charity events and elegant parties. Every weekend, the mansion was filled with laughter, music, and flashing lights from expensive cars parked outside. Amina made sure everything was perfect. The floors shined. The glasses sparkled. The guests never saw the exhaustion in her eyes. Over the past few months, Amina had started feeling weak. At first, she told herself it was just stress. She couldn't afford to rest. Her salary supported her younger brother's school fees and her mother's medicine back in the village. Missing even one day of work felt impossible, so she kept going. She swallowed her pain along with cheap painkillers and told everyone she was fine. But she wasn't fine. There were moments when she had to hold on to the wall to stop the room from spinning. Sometimes she coughed alone in the storage room, so no one would hear. Once, she fainted for a few seconds in the laundry area, but when she woke up, she quickly stood up and continued folding clothes before anyone noticed. Or maybe they noticed and chose not to ask. The family was busy with their own problems. The businessman was dealing with a major company deal. His wife was planning a high-profile charity gala. Their teenage daughter was lost in her own world of social media and friends. No one asked Amina why she looked thinner. No one questioned why her smile had faded. Then one evening, during one of the biggest parties the mansion had ever hosted, something changed. The music was loud. The guests were laughing. Crystal chandeliers lit up the grand hall. Amina was carrying a tray of drinks when her vision blurred again, but this time she couldn't steady herself. The tray slipped from her hands. The sound of shattering glass cut through the music. For the first time, everyone looked at her. She collapsed onto marble floor, her uniform stained, her breathing shallow. The party stopped. The laughter faded into whispers. The powerful businessman rushed forward, shocked and confused, as if seeing her clearly for the very first time. An ambulance was called. The guests slowly left. The house that once felt alive became painfully quiet. And the next morning, when the news reached the family about Amina's condition, about how sick the maid had truly been, guilt settled into the walls of the mansion like a heavy fog. But what the doctor revealed next would shake them even more. Because Amina hadn't just been hiding an illness, she had been hiding a secret. Because Amina hadn't just been hiding an illness, she had been hiding a secret. The doctor spoke quietly in the private hospital room, his voice careful, almost heavy. He explained that Amina had been sick for a long time. The signs were clear. Severe weakness, untreated symptoms, months without proper medical care. But what shocked the family wasn't only how serious her condition was. It was a file the doctor held in his hand. Amina had been diagnosed almost a year ago. She had known, and she had chosen not to tell anyone. The businessman stood there in silence, staring at the hospital wall as if it might give him answers. His wife pressed her hands together tightly, her perfectly polished appearance suddenly meaningless in that cold room. Their daughter, who had once complained about Amina ironing her dress too slowly, now sat in a corner chair, pale and shaken. Why hadn't she said anything? That question echoed in all of their minds. But the nurse quietly revealed something else. Amina had been visiting the hospital alone, late at night, after finishing her long shifts at the mansion. She paid in small cash amounts. She asked the doctors not to contact her workplace. She insisted no one should know. She was worried about losing her job, the nurse said softly. She said the family depended on her salary. The words hit harder than anyone expected. Back at the mansion, things felt different. The staff moved slower. The kitchen felt colder. Even the sound of the large clock in the hallway seemed louder. Amina's small room near the back of the house remained untouched. Her neatly folded clothes were still on the shelf. A small framed photo of her mother and younger brother sat on the bedside table. The businessman found himself standing at her door that evening. For 7 years, he had barely stepped into this part of the house. He had never asked about her life beyond simple instructions. Now he noticed the details. The worn-out suitcase under her bed, the medicine strips hidden inside a drawer, and a notebook filled with careful handwriting. It wasn't a diary exactly. It was a list. School fees paid, medicine sent, grocery expenses, hospital visits. Every rupee was recorded. On the last page, there was something different. A short paragraph written in shaky ink. If something happens to me, please make sure my brother continues his education. The businessman closed the notebook slowly. His chest felt tight. For the first time, the powerful image he had built in society, the successful, respected leader, felt fragile. Meanwhile, whispers began spreading among the household staff. Some said Amina had been too proud to ask for help. Others believed she didn't trust anyone in the house enough to share her truth. But one older housekeeper remembered something that made her uneasy. A few weeks ago, Amina had tried to request a day off for a medical appointment. It had been during preparations for an important corporate dinner. The request was denied. The schedule was too busy. No one had thought much of it at the time. Now, every small moment felt important. Late that night, the businessman received a call from the hospital. Amina's condition was unstable. The doctors were doing everything they could, but the delay in treatment had made things worse. He looked around his massive office, at the awards on the wall and the contracts on his desk. And for the first time, none of it mattered. But there was still something no one understood. If Amina had known about her illness for a year, and if she had been secretly visiting the hospital, then why had she recently increased the amount of money she was sending home? Why had she withdrawn her small savings just 2 weeks before collapsing? What was she preparing for? And what was the rest of the secret she never got the chance to explain? The next morning, the mansion felt heavier than ever. The staff gathered in small groups, whispering in low voices. No one wanted to say it out loud, but they were all thinking the same thing. How had they missed the signs? The invisible maid who worked quietly in the background had been fighting a serious illness alone, and no one truly saw her struggle. At the hospital, Amina remained unconscious. Machines beeped softly around her bed, filling the silence with a steady reminder that time was fragile. The businessman visited again, this time without his usual confidence. He stood by the door longer than necessary before stepping closer. Seeing her without the gray uniform, without the polite smile, made everything painfully real. She looked younger, almost like a tired child who had carried too much responsibility for too long. The doctor explained that stress and exhaustion had made her condition worse. She had ignored clear warning signs. She had chosen work over treatment again and again. She was afraid of being replaced, the doctor said carefully. She kept saying she couldn't afford to lose this job. Those words followed the businessman back to his car. At home, his wife began asking the house manager quiet questions. She learned that Amina often stayed up late after everyone slept, finishing extra chores so the next day would run smoothly. She rarely took her full salary for herself. Most of it was transferred to her village immediately. There had been times when she refused small bonuses, asking instead if the money could be added to her monthly payment. The teenage daughter found herself scrolling through her phone, but the usual distractions didn't feel right anymore. She remembered snapping at Amina over a missing accessory just weeks ago. She remembered the maid apologizing again and again, even though it had been found later in her own bag. The memory now felt sharp and uncomfortable. For the first time, she wondered what Amina had been feeling that day. Was she already in pain? Was she already hiding the truth? Meanwhile, a new detail began to surface. The housekeeper who had seen Amina request that day off mentioned something else. Amina had received several phone calls in the past month that made her anxious. She would step outside to answer them, speaking in a low voice. After each call, she seemed more worried, more distracted. The businessman asked for Amina's phone, which had been placed in her hospital belongings, with permission from the authorities. He scrolled through the recent call history. Most numbers were from her village, but one unfamiliar number appeared repeatedly over the last 3 weeks. When he dialed it, the call went unanswered. He tried again later that night. This time, someone picked up but quickly disconnected. The tension grew quietly, like a storm forming far away. Was someone pressuring her? Was there something more than just medical bills behind her sudden withdrawals? The bank statement showed she had emptied nearly all her savings recently. The money hadn't gone directly to her family. It had been transferred somewhere else. Back in her small room, the staff continued to search gently for clues. Inside her notebook, tucked between pages of expenses, they found a folded document. A school admission form for her younger brother in a private college. The fee was high, far beyond what she normally sent home. Had she taken on more work somewhere else? Had she borrowed money? As the businessman pieced together the timeline, guilt mixed with confusion. Amina had been physically present in the mansion every day, but emotionally, she'd been carrying a private battle no one understood. The serious illness was only part of the story. The financial pressure, the secret phone calls, the fear of losing her job, they formed a larger conflict that was still unfolding. Late that evening, the hospital called again. Amina had briefly regained consciousness. She had whispered something before drifting back to sleep. It wasn't about her illness. It wasn't about pain. It was a single sentence that left the nurse unsettled. Please don't let them find out. The question now wasn't just whether Amina would survive. It was who she had been protecting all along, and what would happen if her hidden truth finally came to light. Please don't let them find out. Those words would not leave the nurse's mind. When she repeated them to the businessman, the air in the hospital corridor felt tight and heavy. Find out what? Who was them? And what truth was so serious that Amina would whisper it even while drifting in and out of consciousness? The businessman drove back to the mansion in silence. The once proud house now felt like a place full of unanswered questions. Every hallway reminded him of how easily someone could be overlooked. The invisible maid had been carrying a burden that was clearly bigger than unpaid medical bills. The repeated phone number still bothered him. He asked a trusted assistant to quietly check it. By morning, a small piece of information came back. The number was registered in a nearby city, not in Amina's village. It wasn't linked to any official business. It was private, prepaid, difficult to trace. Meanwhile, Amina's younger brother finally called the mansion. His voice was nervous and shaking. He had just learned from a neighbor that his sister was in the hospital. He didn't understand how things had gotten so serious. According to him, Amina had told the family she was perfectly healthy. She had said she was strong and that her job was secure. She had recently promised that everything would change soon, that their struggles were almost over. That promise didn't make sense. If she was fighting a serious illness, how could she promise a better future? What had she been planning? The businessman's wife decided to visit Amina's village quietly, without media attention. She wanted to see the family herself. When she arrived, she noticed how simple their life was. A small house, basic furniture. But what caught her attention was a brand new envelope hidden carefully in a drawer. Official documents with Amina's name on them. It was a life insurance policy. The coverage amount was large, far larger than anyone expected. The start date was just 3 weeks ago. Back at the hospital, Amina's condition became unstable again. Doctors worked carefully, adjusting medication, monitoring every change. The tension inside the waiting area was almost unbearable. The businessman, his wife, and their daughter sat together in silence. For the first time, there were no phones in their hands, no business calls, no social events. Only the quiet realization that a human life they had taken for granted was now hanging in uncertainty. The assistant's investigation into the unknown number uncovered something else. The prepaid line had been used to contact an insurance agent several times before the policy was finalized. The timeline was clear. Amina had applied for insurance shortly after learning her illness had worsened. A painful thought slowly formed. Had she known her condition might become fatal? Had she pushed herself to work harder, to hide her symptoms, to avoid treatment, all to ensure the policy remained active? Most policies require continuous employment and stable income. Was she protecting her family in the only way she believed possible? Late that night, the hospital called once more. Amina was conscious again, but weak. The doctor warned that they needed to speak with her soon, while she still had strength. There were consent forms to sign, decisions to make. The businessman hurried through the empty hospital hallway, his footsteps echoing loudly. His heart pounded as he reached her room. Through the glass window, he could see her pale face, her fragile breathing, the machine surrounding her. He stepped inside slowly. Her eyes opened slightly when she sensed someone near. For the first time, she looked directly at him, not as an employee looking at her employer, but as a human being searching for understanding. Her lips moved again, and whatever she was about to say next would change everything. Her lips trembled, and for a second it seemed like no sound would come out. The businessman leaned closer, his heart pounding louder than the steady hospital machines. Amina's fingers weakly gripped the edge of the blanket, as if she was holding on to the last bit of strength she had left. "It wasn't just for my family," she whispered. The words were faint, but clear enough to freeze everyone in the room. The doctor stepped back to give them space. The businessman moved even closer, struggling to understand. "What do you mean?" he asked gently, his voice no longer commanding but desperate. Amina swallowed painfully. "They said if I didn't cooperate, they would tell you I was stealing." The room went silent. Stealing? The accusation didn't make sense. In 7 years, not a single item had gone missing under her responsibility. She had been trusted with keys, with safes, with private rooms. The idea felt impossible, and yet her fear looked real. "Who said that?" he asked, his tone sharper now. But before she could answer, a wave of weakness overtook her. Her eyes closed again. The doctor quickly intervened, adjusting her medication and asking everyone to step outside. In the hallway, tension returned stronger than ever. The businessman replayed her words in his mind. Cooperate, stealing, threats. Suddenly, the unknown phone number felt far more dangerous than mysterious. Back at the mansion, he ordered a quiet internal review of staff records and security footage from the past few months. Nothing obvious appeared at first, but one detail slowly surfaced. On several late nights, after most staff had left, someone had accessed the office wing where confidential business files were kept. The access log showed temporary clearance codes that were often used by cleaning staff under supervision. On those same nights, Amina had been scheduled for extended cleaning shifts. The realization hit like a cold wave. Had someone used her access as a cover? Had she been pressured to open doors, to look the other way, to unknowingly allow something illegal to happen inside the mansion? The assistant dug deeper. One junior employee in the businessman's company had recently resigned without notice. His name appeared in internal emails connected to sensitive financial documents. Phone records showed a possible link between him and the prepaid number that had contacted Amina repeatedly. The situation was no longer just about a sick Maid hiding an illness. It was turning into something bigger. Corporate secrets, possible fraud, and a vulnerable woman caught in the middle. Meanwhile, in her village, Amina's brother revealed another troubling detail during a phone call. Amina had sounded frightened during their last conversation. She had told him that if anything unexpected happened to her, he should not trust strangers who come asking questions. At the time, he thought she was simply worried about her health. Now it sounded like a warning. At the hospital, security was quietly increased. The businessman didn't know who might try to silence her if she knew too much. The thought alone made his chest tighten. Had her illness really worsened naturally? Or had the extreme stress of being threatened pushed her body beyond its limits? Late that evening, the assistant rushed into the waiting area with urgent news. A large sum of money had been transferred into Amina's account 2 months ago, far more than her salary. It had come from an anonymous source. Within days, she had moved that same amount into the newly purchased life insurance policy. It wasn't desperation. It was strategy. She hadn't just been preparing for her family's future. She had been bargaining. The stakes were now terrifyingly clear. If she spoke, powerful reputations could collapse. If she stayed silent, the truth might disappear with her. Inside the hospital room, Amina stirred again, and outside, someone unfamiliar had just been seen asking the front desk about her condition. The unfamiliar man at the front desk didn't stay long. When hospital security approached him, he claimed he was just asking for directions and quickly walked away. But the message was clear. Someone knew Amina was conscious again. The businessman didn't wait any longer. He contacted a trusted legal advisor and quietly informed the authorities about the suspicious access logs, the unknown transfers, and the threats Amina had described. For the first time, he stopped worrying about reputation and started worrying about truth. Inside the hospital room, Amina opened her eyes once more. This time, the doctor confirmed she was stable enough to speak for a short while. The businessman sat beside her, not as an employer, but as someone finally ready to listen. "You're safe here," he said softly. "No one can hurt you." Tears formed at the corners of her eyes. For months she had carried fear alone. Now, the word seemed to give her just enough courage. She explained everything slowly. The junior employee who had resigned had approached her during a late shift. He knew about her illness. He had overheard a phone call she made to the hospital. He told her that treatment would be expensive and that she wouldn't survive long without money. Then he offered her a deal. All she had to do was use her cleaning access card to unlock certain office doors after hours. She wouldn't touch any documents. She wouldn't even need to know what he was copying. In return, he would transfer money into her account. When she hesitated, he threatened her. He said if she refused, he would plant evidence and accuse her of stealing from the mansion. A poor maid against a powerful household. He was sure no one would believe her. At first, she refused. But when her condition worsened and the medical costs increased, fear for her brother's future took over. She agreed to unlock doors twice. She never entered the office herself. She never saw what he did inside. The money was transferred exactly as promised. But then she realized something was wrong. The files he accessed were related to major company investments. If they were leaked, the businessman's entire business reputation could collapse. She panicked. She confronted the employee and demanded he stop. That was when the threats became harsher. He warned her to stay silent and continue cooperating. Instead of continuing, Amina did something unexpected. She used the money he transferred to buy a life insurance policy. She believed her illness might take her life soon. If she couldn't fix the mistake she made, at least her family would be protected. And if the truth ever came out, the insurance would prevent her brother from suffering because of her choice. "I was going to tell you," she whispered weakly, after the next hospital visit. "I didn't want you to think I betrayed you." The businessman felt the weight of her words. The invisible maid had tried to carry responsibility for everyone, her family, her employer, even the company's future, while fighting a serious illness alone. But the story didn't end there. The legal team worked quickly. Security footage, access logs, and financial records were handed over to investigators. Within days, the junior employee was located. Digital evidence confirmed he had been selling confidential data to a competitor. Amina's cooperation had been limited to unlocking doors. She had never profited beyond securing protection for her family. The businessman publicly cleared her name before any rumors could spread. He admitted that his household had failed to notice her suffering. He announced support for her full medical treatment and established a staff welfare program to ensure no employee would ever feel invisible again. For a brief moment, it felt like justice had been served. But as the investigation expanded, another discovery surfaced. The competitor company that had purchased the stolen information was an outsider. It was secretly controlled by someone much closer to home, a silent business partner the businessman had trusted for years. The betrayal went deeper than anyone imagined, and as Amina lay recovering, unaware of this final truth, the businessman realized that the real danger had never been the sick maid hiding a secret. It had been the people smiling beside him all along. The news about the silent business partner felt like the final crack in a wall that had already begun to crumble. The businessman sat alone in his office at night, staring at years of contracts and framed photographs. Trust, he realized, was fragile. He had spent so much time protecting his company from outside competition that he never imagined betrayal could come from someone sitting at his own table. The investigation moved quickly after that. Digital trails, hidden transactions, and private emails revealed the full picture. The trusted partner had quietly funded the competitor company, using stolen confidential data to manipulate deals and weaken the business from within. The junior employee had only been a middleman. Amina had unknowingly become a small piece in a much larger corporate fraud scheme. But this time, the businessman did not stay silent. He cooperated fully with the authorities. The partner was removed from the company. Legal action was taken, and internal systems were strengthened. The company's reputation faced questions, but transparency protected it from collapse. Instead of hiding the scandal, he addressed it openly. For the first time, the powerful image he had built was replaced with something more human: accountability. At the hospital, Amina's condition slowly improved. The doctors adjusted her treatment plan, and with proper medical care, her strength began to return little by little. It was not a miracle recovery, but it was hope. The stress that had weighed on her for months was finally lifted. She no longer had to hide phone calls or carry threats alone. One quiet afternoon, the businessman visited her again. This time, there was no tension in the room. He told her the truth, that her name had been cleared, that the real criminals had been exposed, and that her brother's education would continue without interruption. He also told her something else. "You were never invisible," he said softly. "We just failed to see you." Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from fear this time, but from relief. For years, she had walked through the mansion like a shadow. Now, she felt seen as a person, not just as a maid, not just as an employee, but as Amina. Back at the mansion, real changes took place. A staff health program was introduced. Regular medical checkups became mandatory. An open-door policy allowed every worker to speak directly to management without fear. The teenage daughter began volunteering at local health clinics, quietly learning about empathy in ways no classroom could teach. In her village, Amina's brother received the official confirmation of his college admission, fully funded. The life insurance policy she had taken out was no longer needed as a desperate safety net. It became a symbol of her strength and sacrifice instead of her fear. Months later, when Amina finally returned to the mansion, not as a fragile patient, but as someone rebuilding her life, the atmosphere felt different. The same walls stood tall, the same chandeliers sparkled, but something inside had changed. People greeted her by name. They asked how she was feeling. They listened. The story of the sick maid who no one realized had quietly transformed everyone involved. It exposed corporate betrayal, uncovered hidden secrets, and revealed how easily someone's suffering can go unnoticed. But more than that, it reminded them that behind every uniform, every title, and every role is a human being carrying unseen battles. In the end, the biggest lesson was not about scandal or fraud. It was about awareness, about looking twice, about asking one simple question: "Are you okay?" before it becomes too late. Because sometimes the person we overlook the most is the one holding everything together.